Thank you so much for being here on a gross rainy night in January. And thank you so much to Georgina and the 22 for letting us host this amazing talk here. I will briefly introduce our amazing speakers and run through the schedule. I'm so excited to introduce you to Natasha Silver Bell in the middle, the founder and CEO of Silverbell Global, a recovery consultancy that I have the privilege of working with. Natasha and our many teams work with clients and families every day struggling with all kinds of things, namely substance use, addiction, eating disorders, relationship struggles, divorce, family systems, all the things basically. And Natasha's a pioneer in the recovery world, a speaker, a thought leader, an expert on recovery, and has flown over from New York to be with us and share her wisdom as an expert, but also as a sober woman, a mother, and a person with lived experience. Dr. Adrienne Loth, over there, is a world-leading psychotherapist and clinical sexologist. Adrienne and Natasha have worked with clients together for many years, and Adrienne now runs her practice from Paris. She has a PhD in clinical sexology, is a sex therapist, a clinical sexologist, licensed marriage and family therapist, certified sex therapist, and clinical supervisor, and is certified personality disorder treatment provider, trained in DBT, and many other things, so she knows some stuff. And then obviously last by no means least, Jean Campbell, the amazing host of I'm Fine, advocate, supermodel, who will guide us through the next couple of hours. So,
thank you, Evie. I want to start by saying thank you both so much, and thank you everyone for coming this evening. I think the reason that I wanted to do this talk is because relationships and sex there are obviously two things that everyone has a connection to and has a personal relationship to in some way. And for me, the opposite of love is fear, and I definitely have had and sometimes still do have fears around relationships and sex. And so I think having these two expert, incredible women to kind of talk us through lots of the different aspects to that, whether it's myths and, ways to get out of difficult situations, how we can improve the situations that we're in. So I'm really, really happy to be here. Why don't we start by talking about why you guys think that this is an important conversation?
So many things come to mind, and the first thought when Jean and I were talking about it with Evie, Miss Evie Donald, let's give props for Evie. I just want to say tonight would not be possible without her. It's been such an honor and privilege to work alongside you for almost 3 years now, and I'm just so impressed with your growth, which I know Adrienne relates to a love mindset. And so when I thought about doing a talk, I'm like, well, yes, I have accomplishments and things of that nature, but let's find the best that I know to come and help us with this conversation. So why did you think we should talk about this?
What I think as a clinician is it's hard for people to even talk to me about some of these topics. Like, they will wait maybe like a year in and, great relationship, great rapport, tons of trust. And they'll be like, by the way, I don't really like to have sex with my husband. And I'm like, what? Like, why don't we, you're going to be like, what do you mean? Why don't we talk about this like any time along the way? And they feel shy, or they feel embarrassed, or they feel shame. And that to me says like, you're paid, confidential person that you're very attached to and very connected to. If you feel like it's difficult there, it's really difficult with your partner, and it's sometimes difficult with your friends. I think societal expectations, things make us think that there's these fantastical, like, passionate forever marriages. We're never in fights. And people will say, like, oh, we have sex every day, don't you? Or, these things happen. And one of those events can happen to someone, and they'll kind of shut down about these topics, like, indefinitely. So I think even a night like tonight starts people having a dialogue, like, let's get together and have, like, sex and relationship talk once a month. Or you go home to your partner and say, like, hey, I realized I don't ask for what I want or need. Like, isn't that weird? So I think, like, just getting this going, it's like this momentum and this energy that then can carry into the world. Yeah.
What are the things that you think kind of stop people from being able to talk about sex or aspects of their relationships, or, you know, not being in a relationship, and how that is?
Well, before we go there, because I don't want to lose that thought, you have the most thoughtful questions. You'll see a little pouch on your chairs. And one of the things with Silverbell Globo is that we like to push the envelope in a very elegant, mindful, thoughtful, and importantly, safe way. And I hope Dr. Loth will talk a lot about safety in conversation, safety in intimacy. And so with the little elephant, you'll say, please let me out. And a lot of times people will take this elephant into their personal relationships or business relationships, or mothers and daughters, sisters and brothers, husbands and wives, partners of any kind. We'll take this and have a really mindful conversation. So maybe that's a great way to segue into Jean's thought.
Things that get barriers. I think culture is huge. I think unrealistic expectations from, you know, what people share on the outside, you know, the highlight reel of social media, or what people want to present when they get together with friends, like, everything's great, like, I'm so glad I did this, you know. I think that shame, feeling different than other people, being like, maybe I don't really enjoy sex, or this kind of sex, or the person I'm with, or, you know, this kind of intimacy, and they don't even know where to start talking about that. I think that past trauma, or family of origin things, like if you've had a family that made it very shameful to like discuss things like pleasure or sex lives at all. I know mine did. It's like it doesn't feel very normal, or it doesn't come out very naturally. So I think what's around you can impact it a lot, but I also think what's inside you can impact it a lot if you feel like you've been hurt or something changed in you. Again, these things may happen one time, and for 20 years you might carry this kind of wall, like we talked about, where you just don't go there.
Thank you. When it comes to feeling like we should be in a relationship, or I must be in a relationship, or why am I not in a relationship? What is, in your experience, what's the kind of number one reason that people feel that they want to be in a relationship?
In a healthy way, companionship, partnership's awesome. Like having a actual partner that's like your biggest fan and on your team and can meet your needs and you can connect with in the most deep, profound way. In an unhealthier way, I think fantasy, fantasy pedestal, like fantasy that this person might pluck me out of all the things I don't really want to deal with or handle, like maybe financial insecurity, loneliness, not knowing who we are, having a community. These things can be things where we'll create lots of ideas about people to have them magically take us out of those issues and fix them for us in our mind. It doesn't work. Spoiler alert.
That's why I'm here. I can share with you all my past relationships that didn't work. I'm a great example of the lived experience. That's what I offer tonight.
Thanks. Natasha, it would be great to hear your perspective and experience, if you feel comfortable, on what a healthy relationship is and what a healthy relationship is not.
Well, I'd like to say everything that comes out of my mouth that sounds really smart and wise comes from someone else, and from all of my mistrials. I'm not very good at getting it right the first time, but I think one of the assets to being a good partner is learning how to own your part. Ugh, that's such a pain to say. It really sucks because I have to be honest about where I am in a relationship. So I'm actually here with my two boys. I have a 22-year-old and an almost 20-year-old, Sam and Ben, and they are not allowed here tonight. And they know that we're down here talking about sex, and I think they're going to freak out if they hear me and sex and my words come out of their mother. But I think the father of their children and I had to move away from an unhealthy relationship, and that was probably the hardest part because I had to look at my stuff and what right did I have to leave. I faced financial insecurity, and I faced the idea of being alone. And those were actually the two biggest fears, you talk about fear, that were keeping me in the relationship. Who wants to admit that? I have 3 beautiful children with this man. How do I, one, have the right to leave him and because it was very unhealthy, and I'm not going to make this about him, but I made a choice to marry him. I made a choice to have children with him. I am a sober woman now, and at the time I sobered up, and I could see my part is that, why did I choose to stay? And if fear was the reason I was staying, then to your point, that's not a very healthy way to have a relationship. So I had to face my own fears. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And Adrienne, what do you think, from your experience with your clients and just your life, what are the things that keep people stuck in an unhealthy situation or an unhappy situation? Is it, I think also another aspect that's quite interesting is, am I staying here because I feel comfortable and safe, or am I staying here because it feels alive and fulfilling?
You have 500 hours for this topic. There's so much to say here. I think what helps people a lot in my work, I don't like to have therapy where you just say everything that's wrong and sad and then like, bye. It's like, what can we do? Like, what do we do about this? Like, I don't feel connected. I feel bored. I feel complacent. I feel out of love. Like, and it's like, oh, because your childhood robbed you of those things. Like, see you next week. It's like, what do we do? I'm like, what do we do? So I think when you ask that question, like, what keeps people stuck? I think that love, if you look at like the pure idea of love, there's always words like it's expansive. It like allows for growth. It's like a safe ground to like evolve, right? These kind of bigger things. And I think when you find something constricting or fear, or you're smaller or you're getting littler, it's a good way to look at what's up with that? Like, why? And the answers could be things like attachment to what's familiar. You know, maybe you're really used to a family or other partners you've had that are really unavailable, or they might be intermittently available, and you kind of like the chemistry of the up and down, in and out, dopamine hits, excitement. And there might just be a day where you like, you know, sometimes I stop thinking and ask how you feel, where you might just like feel like, I don't know if I like this roller coaster anymore. I think I feel kind of unstable, you know? Or, wow, I haven't asked for my needs to get met in like 40 years. What if I started, right? You know, so I always, when I see couples to kind of consult, should I stay or should I go? I'm always like, let's like try everything first. Like if you're already here, like let's like go for it and like totally ask for our needs to get met and like see if people can deliver and see if people can get sober or like come home from work dinners earlier or whatever is kind of going on. So I'm really into like solution focused is like route A. And route B then is like looking at like, are there things in me that are unresolved? And is that what I'm picking over and over? And that's when you can get into deeper work like trauma therapy, some time alone, journaling, meditation, and just like figuring out really what you want and what you like and what makes you tick can help relational stuff.
If I may just jump in there, because for me, we had a little rap session before and a few Zooms before that. One of the hardest parts about waking up to my reality was that I didn't think I had permission to have a voice in the relationship. And then as a sober woman, like I wasn't numbing my pain anymore. And I was like, wait a second, this doesn't feel good. But I didn't really think I had the right to have a voice. I think you just said after 40 years, what right do I have? And my parents are still married, and they met when they were like, this is weird, but like 18 and 13. But they waited until my mom was 18 to get married. But that's like the Midwest of Montana. Anyways.
Sorry. I just lost my train of thought. No, that's super, thank you. When it comes to you, Natasha, why do you think it was that you didn't have a voice in your relationship? Did you know that you were meant to have a voice? Adrienne, you've talked about the importance of communication.
Oh, heavy sigh. Yeah, I've healed my inner trauma. There's something called internal family systems work. I've worked with a trauma therapist. I've done my internal work, but it wasn't until I had a clear mind. For me, I do have a substance abuse problem. I can't have just one drink, so that's not what tonight is about. But until I could really come to terms with no alcohol, no substances, because I don't know what moderation is, I had to then face my fears, my insecurities of not feeling good enough. And I think it's not like an aha thing, oh, you poor thing. I think a lot of us struggle with that. I don't think that's a me thing. And so the more I was able to talk about it with a trusted person, and it did take a year or two for me to be honest about it. And finally, when I was able to be honest about how I really felt about myself, I didn't have a college degree. I was a model in New York City, and that's all I was good for. What else was I good for? So I don't know if that's helpful in getting this conversation going more.
No, it's great. When it comes to kind of the different stages of life and getting into a relationship, how does that sort of play out? Because I guess when you're in your teens or early 20s, maybe feels a lot about like discovering the world and making mistakes and finding out about things. And it's sort of this new thing. When it comes to relationships, how do you see people across the ages entering into a relationship? And is there kind of like a better situation or a worse situation?
I think forever it's the dance between like wanting intimacy so much, like desiring, this whatever kind of partner we dream of, the healthy one. It's like wanting intimacy and then a fear of vulnerability. Like what if I get that perfect partner or that ideal husband or wife or whoever we're dating, and then they don't like me or they think I'm not enough or they leave me? Like that would be horrible. So I think when you're in your 20s, maybe you don't have enough data sets yet to know what you actually do like or don't like or want or need, right? So you're kind of collecting information, like that felt good, that didn't feel good. I don't like when people treat me like this. I really like when people treat me like that, right? But I think rather than age, I really meet people where they are and ask like, what do you want? Like, do you want to have fun? Do you want a connection? Do you want a husband? Do you want like a bunch of partners? Like where are you at and what do you want? Because if you start there, I think, even people that are in their 20s might always have felt like they were traditional and wanted to settle down and have babies by 26 or something, right? Like, and then some people are like, I just want to have like a lot of fun until I hit menopause and then I'll decide, So it's like, it's kind of starting there and working backward, I guess.
When it comes to healthy relationships that can kind of elevate the lives of the people that you speak to, are there kind of intentions that they come into the relationship with that seem to be better in the way that the relationship then plays out? Is it about I want to find myself and learn about who I am with this person and grow? Or is there like a confirmation of who you are? Like, where does it come from?
That sounds good. What you just said. That sounds nice. I think that the set of things or qualities are, it's great communication, a commitment to whatever the couple decides they're doing, individuality versus the connection. So not losing yourself in someone else or trying to keep someone by losing yourself. Shared values or an understanding of someone else's values and empathy and acceptance for their values. And respect. I think respect is a big one of each other and what you get up to and how you live your life. Those are the first things.
How does respect play out in terms of the balance between kind of having that stability and security and feeling respected and all of that versus the kind of need for passion and surprise and basically sex?
I'll turn it back to you. How have you felt when you felt like people respected you, and how have you felt when you felt like people did not respect you either?
Yeah, Jean.
Like, how did that feel?
I think it's actually a really interesting question because I would love to say I always thought about being respected as a priority, but now it definitely is a priority. But I think I didn't necessarily think of, wanting to be respected as like a priority actually, because I think in the past I'd probably want to be validated which wouldn't necessarily be congruent with like being respected, you know? I don't know.
I might just add that, and we talked before, and a lot of times in our work with our teams, one of the pieces that comes, male, female, same sex, is that they don't pause enough to think about what they want. Again, that choice that I have agency over what kind of partner I choose, my part in making this relationship happen, and not just ending up in a relationship. And I think that happens by default. I might be attracted to this person, but I'm 6 months down the road and I've never really thought about what kind of relationship I want, and I'm 22, 23, 24, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, life is happening. And so I think just learning how to pause and ask yourself what you want. Again, for me, that just didn't happen because I didn't think I had a right to ask myself what I wanted or needed, but
You got there.
it took some time, but here I am.
I also think that differentiating between a partnership, like, again, what do you want? Do you want a partner? Do you want a life partner? Or do you want to have fun? Do you want chemistry? Or do you want, like, someone that's really good with taxes? You know, like, I mean, it can be both. But I think, like, I can say I've had sex with some people that I would consider, like, maybe a bad person now if I looked at, you know, their values and, like, how they live their life. And but at the time, I wasn't looking for them to be a partner. I was just like, the goal was connection, the goal was pleasure. So I think that getting clear about that, like, I don't know if I necessarily need a one-night stand lover to respect me, but I would definitely want someone I was seriously dating and want my friends and family to respect me. Yeah.
Whether you're in a relationship or not, or whether you're in some kind of, I don't know, like romance or whatever, how do you see the narratives that we kind of have in ourselves about ourselves or about us when it comes to relationships and love and sex? How do those narratives play out? How do you see them affecting the way that the relationship or the sexual partnership or being single is for a person?
It's kind of everything. I think the way, you know, what's between you and the mirror first is usually what you're kind of attracting and what you're, you know, putting out there to draw in people or to stand up for what you want or need. So I think if you do some work with yourself, you know, if you do even movement, yoga, journaling, mindfulness, meditation, girl talk, sex store games, you know, all sorts of like pleasure activities, education, you kind of feel competent. Like you'll be like, I know a lot of things about sex at this point in my career. Like I'm like, I really do, you know, and it makes you feel different. Like you're like, I know a lot of what I like and don't like. I know a lot about like how to enhance pleasure if it's not really like working. Like I know how to be compassionate if people have sexual issues. Like, right. So I think getting clear between you and you, right? Like about like how much you want to know about your pleasure and how much you want to experience it. It definitely comes out interpersonally. I say that a million times a day. Like whatever's going on with you will then go on with you and other people, right? So does that resonate?
I think you should say that again. What was that?
Well, just, yeah, whatever's going on inside of you and whatever you're getting up to, it's really going to come out interpersonally, right? You know, so if you're having like horrible self-esteem issues, you know, I was chatting earlier about someone had put on a lot of weight in a marriage and they stopped going to the gym and they started smoking lots of cigs and lost their job. It's like if they're kind of communicating, I don't want to take care of myself. Interpersonally, people are like, do I then take care of you or do I take care of me and not look at you? Or, you know, right? So whatever's going on with you is going to definitely go on with you and another.
So obviously in our kind of, a lot of the conversation that we've had so far has been about being in a relationship, but obviously that's not necessarily something that everyone wants. I would say that for me, I feel like as a child or as a teenager, I always kind of thought, oh, that's like the dream, you know, to be really happy and in love or whatever. You know, loads of films and songs are written about it, and it can be this thing that feels very out of reach. But what can you say about the benefit of actually not being in a relationship, and maybe even more than not being in a relationship, actively, like, you know, being adverse to like relationships, sex, dating, whatever? Like, is there a benefit to basically being alone and like quite firm about that?
I loved everything you said except aversion. I think once there's aversion, I feel like there's something there, there's suffering or something like that, or it makes me feel like, like we're like this. But every other part, I think it's awesome. I think there are periods in my life and my clients' lives and people that I admire and experts that, that time to, like, you've both had these periods we've discussed, to really like have the luxury, I say, to find yourself, to like really choose who you want to talk to, what you get up to, what food you eat, what you watch, like what you read, what you consume, how you experience pleasure without anything interpersonal. Like it's, it can be a game changer. I think that feeling strong in that and empowered rather than like aversion or fear or like reactionary, like I had a bad divorce, therefore like I'm afraid of love and I must be alone. More like I'm going to spend some time alone. Like this is awesome. It's like the vibe I encourage more. But I think there's a lot of depth and richness if it's the life you choose. Again, if you're longing for a partner and to have children or something and it's not happening, it's not good to fake it and say, I love this. But if it's something you're choosing and leaning into, I think it's like can be such a profound, exciting, cool time for all men, women, everybody I work with. So how do you feel about Natasha?
No, I mean, I'm in a season right now where I'm at an age where I really like being alone, and it's not in an isolation way. It's in more of in a solace way where you were talking about, what do I like? How do I like to move in my house? I like hanging out with my animals. I like choosing who I'm going to talk to. I don't pick up every phone call anymore. I get to have agency and not feel like have to respond. It is a choice.
Something that I hear a lot is relationships take work, or it takes time, or relationships are a commitment. Obviously, you've spoken about it being a commitment. When it comes to, when it comes to your time, what about if you're the kind of person who actually doesn't really have time to be in a relationship, but that is also something that you want? How do you see people kind of navigating being like extremely career driven or busy or traveling a lot, or maybe they have another family, how does that play out?
I think being someone that's very career driven and traveling a lot, I think it's finding like-minded individuals. It's not trying to couple with somebody that resents your job or thinks that it's annoying that you're always helping people or, wishes you were home on the sofa every night. I think that, one of my big jokes with couples is once you get cozy together, like the conversation's often like, what do we eat? What do we watch? Like that's all people start talking about. Like, what are we going to get tonight for dinner? What are we going to watch? Right. And if you have a different life where you're like, I'm in DC this week and then I'm in Denver and then like the kids have a thing Saturday and right, it's a much different rhythm. So again, my favorite topic ever is talking about our preferences and that not everything's pathological. Like, not everything's a fucking problem. Not everything is sick. Not everything's trauma. Some things are trauma. Some things are not trauma. And just, like, having preferences. Like, if you're someone that, like, wants more adventure, like, please don't date someone that, like, is not into being out of the house, And if you really want to be cozy and, like, traveling makes you exhausted, like, find a like-minded person. This is where dating apps I know everybody hates them because they're horrible, but you can really you can list this. You can say, I am looking for somebody that respects a woman that is very busy and gone all the time. And then it's someone's choice to accept or deny that. So I think like there's a lot of like self-empowerment and self-agency where I think we can get re-excited again about picking the life and the partner and the friendships and the career that we want. Like I do see people shift profoundly in my practice and get there. And you've done it, I've done it. So there's 3. And I bet many people here have or want to. So, yeah. Did that answer?
Yes. Would you say that it's better to lead with kind of lifestyle and values value alignment and compatibility, or is it better to lead with feeling and desire and passion? Obviously, there's not like a binary answer.
I think you need both. I say maybe it takes 3 to 6 months to get to know someone, minimum, depending on how much you see each other. If you're very busy, maybe longer. But in this 3 to 6 months period where you're getting to know people, I think what I often see is like fantasy pedestal projections, right? So that can be like, I have so much chemistry with this person. We have so much in common. This is going to be so awesome. They're going to be my other half. They may pluck me out of the things I don't want to deal with and make it all right. So I really work a lot with people to try to check if it's a behavior that you really see, or if you're kind of in a fantasy projection of things that you'd really want and need if you had the perfect person, and you're kind of trying to make it be true with this one because they're so close, right? And I think, again, chemistry and attraction and, those brain chemicals, right? Like, those don't often determine if someone's like a good other half. It just determines that you feel some sort of connection to them, right? So I think you can start there and then maybe integrate in evidence if they're really like matching what it is you want.
Natasha, when it comes to kind of patterns, would you be happy to talk a little bit about what patterns are and what you've learned from patterns, how you've broken patterns as well? How do you even know when you're in a pattern?
Such an important question. And I think that's what I was speaking for from my lived experience. I ended up in a relationship with somebody, and our common denominator happened to have been substance misuse. And so until I got sober, I didn't even see that we really didn't have much in common. And my children are well aware of this. They know they're a gift from God. So I'm just going to lead with that. But when I did wake up and realize my part in these patterns, and I was stopping those patterns and having the fear be the controlling interest, shall we say, of me staying. So when I chose to leave, that was probably one of the scariest things I ever did. Getting sober was hard, but walking away from a relationship where there was security and there was, biological, father to my children. And then going in and starting to date again, I finally had a sober mind that I could choose what partner, what did I want, and I had to be careful not to fall back into old patterns. And so I was actually really slow and methodical about my dating. I went very slowly. I was dating quite a few people at one time, and that was kind of fun. But at that time, I was trying to be so mindful about what it felt like to sit across the table from this person. What did it feel like to walk across the park with them? And then I would pay attention to how often would they text me? Or if they weren't texting me, what anxiety was creeping up? We talk about the power of that text and what dopamine hit that is. And I was this really great guy I was dating at the time and this big life, but he wasn't texting me the way in which I wanted to be respected and what our dating pattern was starting to show. So I decided to pause things. And that was an empowering moment for me because on paper and all these other things, I was like, oh, he's a duh choice, of course. But I wasn't willing to put up with that. And it was because I had suffered so much in a past relationship. And you talked about getting really small. In the past relationship, I didn't have agency. I didn't have a voice. I didn't think I had the right to have a voice. And I didn't have a partner who lifted me up. And that was something I was really looking for.
What was it like kind of starting to date or be open to people again when you already had built a life for yourself, you had children? What was it like kind of entering the scene?
This is about 15 years ago at the time. And I had a sober mind, which to me was such a novel idea because, I had really been from like 17 onward. I hadn't really given myself the agency to have choice of what partner I chose to be with. I would just end up with somebody. And so for the idea that I could actually choose, I felt so reassuring to me. And I didn't have to go home with somebody, or I didn't have to call them the next day, if I didn't want to, or just having that agency of choice was very healing. I don't know if that... You give exercises like that probably in your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that that pull, the pattern, the repeating rhymes, the like, why do I always end up with like X kind of guy? It is powerful. Like, I mean, that stuff can like take people down. It's taken me down. It's taken you, you know. But I think that, you know, patterns, right? Like I like to really get out of judgment. Like judgment and shame really shut down the brain's learning centers. It's proven. So the antidote to shame is self-compassion, right? So if you tend to keep picking like, you know, dudes that party too hard or women that are emotionally unavailable or people that remind you of your dad or people that are cold like your mom, or, right? Instead of being like, why am I like this? It's so good to be like, what about this feels so familiar? And what about this do I keep like chasing, you know, like what about this? And I think, you know, someone for me growing up in total chaos, I think, fun fact, Playboy bunny mom, drug trafficker dad. So my patterns were like adventure, like hot, sexy people, more adventure, right? Like I had no concept of like mundane or chill or normal or like not fast lane, I guess, forever. So when I had mundane, I can't tell you how many times my therapist will be like, Adrienne, you really struggle with the mundane. Like, I know, right? So, but you see my attitude about it, like my compassion, and I joke and I'm like, oh man, I'm doing this again. It's a loving, kind way to look at like maybe some of the bullshit that formed the roads in our brain, and then like gently trying to make new ones where it's like, as an adult woman now, like, you know, adventure and superficial looks and all those things I was trained to value don't really work for me. So it's like finding different roads and building new roads in my brain where I'm like, oh, the mundane can be awesome with like an awesome person, and like the mundane can be like wonderful.
You know what I want to add to that too, though, because I was such a black and white. I live in gray. I'm very open now. And so for me, when I was first coming into this evolution of breaking patterns, I had to do the opposite. So like as a former model, I was validated for what I look like. So I didn't think I should wear makeup, have jewelry, or wear nice clothes. I'm going to be very beige and bland and humble, and I don't need that stuff in my life. And the truth is I really like to look pretty. I like nice things. I like beautiful jewelry and fashion outfits. And can I have both? You know, and just knowing that I have the right to have both the mundane, the special, the fancy, but the motives behind it actually are for me. I know that may sound like a cliche, but I get dressed for me in the morning. The jewelry I buy is for me.
So, Adrienne, when it comes to love versus attachment, and you know the attachment being more connected to the pattern side of things, how can one know the difference between actual love or, you know, the freedom and openness versus like attachment?
I think would be impossible to know, but I think that the exploration is. You know, attachment can be, I would say, familiarity, right? Like that makes us attached to things like, I know this, it's home, like we're there. Or it can be like something you sense in your nervous system, right? Like where you're like, I feel really safe, or you're like, I feel really like not myself. I feel like I'm not my highest self or my best self, or like connected to myself, right? So like kind of self-questioning, self-diagnosing, right?
What would some of the kind of telltale signs of being like not yourself? Would that be kind of not hanging out with your friends as much, or would it be like stopping exercising, or if you were someone who exercised, or would it be like doom scrolling loads? Yeah. What are the signs?
More, keep going. Yeah. I think it's kind of like when people say thriving, it's been a little overused, but like if you envision a thriving you, right, that's probably someone that balances their social life with love, like meets their goals, like has dreams, like feels excited for the future. So if you find yourself like compromising what you want and who you are, you know, in order to stay home in case someone might call, or like grieve the loss of a person that you're unsure about for like, you know, over 1 year or something, right? Like anytime. So I guess there's no clean answer to that, but I think that the general rule is like the kind of love we're looking for should like enhance like your natural gifts and help you like grow and bloom and evolve in that way. And if you find yourself like, again, getting constricted or smaller or less confident or less into your hobbies or less into friendships that please you or less into like your dreams as a child, I guess it's a good symbol or signal that like just to see what's up and listen, sometimes it's me, it's not the person, right? Like sometimes I'm being people pleasy or I'm not asking for my needs to get met, and if I decided to, it might actually go well, right? So it's not always like the partner's fault. Sometimes it's our response to a person, the dance between us and someone.
So it is very much, when it comes to, wanting to be in like the best situation that you can be, it is actually a very individual and personal thing. There's not like one box ticking exercise that you can do. Nice.
The only one would be, it's, don't think like, how do you feel? So if you think like, well, this person's a really nice guy, or like, my friends really like him, or like, I think he's like a good choice, right? Like those are thinking things, or like, I feel like I should be happy, I should be attracted to him, like he's attractive, right? I think like, how do you feel with someone? Like you were talking about that. Do you feel safe? Do you feel like excited? Do you feel like you can grow and learn and change and evolve? And we were all chatting earlier about like, what if your house burnt down? Because I came from Los Angeles where a lot of houses burnt down on my clients. And like, how do people handle like adversity? How do they handle a really bad day? How do they handle like maybe losing their parents when we're adults, right? Like life gets more complicated and more heavy and more serious as time goes on. So, coming back around, it's like finding someone where you feel like you can go through really awesome, fun, exciting times, and you can also go through adversity together and both feel okay. You don't think they're okay.
I'd love to kind of move the conversation into sex. I think something that kind of springs to mind is, what is the difference between sensuality and sexuality for both of you? And is there kind of overlap? What is the importance of both of those things when it comes to like having great sex?
I'll jump in first, and she'll bring it home. So for me, when I think about sensuality, isn't actually a physical sense. That is sexuality to me. And so sensuality to me is a psychological, not game, but a mindset that I need to get in order to go to a sexual place that feels fun and free and adventurous and also incredibly safe. And so psychologically, if the foreplay happens like days, weeks, or months in advance of maybe being intimate with somebody, whether it's your first time or your 1,000th time, the mind game for me, and you'll explain this better, but that's so important to me, and something I did learn from not having that, and I know that I don't like that, and so for me, when somebody starts really not just caring about my passions and my interests and placating me in order to get to that end result, but it really comes from a genuine place, there is a feeling that happens inside of me that I'm very in tune with now. So this is like my temple. I'm not going to give this to anybody, that's my choice now, but in other times, that was a different pattern. And so for now, yep. What does all that mean?
No, that was perfect. I think, I don't know, like actually what the dictionary would say about this, but I think, your own relationship with your body, with your pleasure, with like what you feel like you need and deserve, all those things like kind of go in the vibe, I guess, of sensuality. Like, like I feel like a creature in this world that is a human woman, and this is how I express it. It might be like how you dress, or how you flirt, or how you masturbate, or what you kind of content you take in, might be like more of the sensual nature. And then sexuality is kind of, everything that involves another person or yourself that would have to do with like sex organs, I guess, and like pleasure and like having orgasms. And so to me, it's more medical, I guess, like sexual stuff in my mind, and sensual stuff's more spiritual. But I think some people may intuitively be more or less into one or the other, and they can kind of make the other one grow.
What do you think the balance is between like physiology and psychology when it comes to pleasure?
So many things. I think that time, I guess, like I don't know many people in my personal life or my practice that actually make this a big priority. Like time spent educating yourself about like even female anatomy and like how we're built and like what would work the best. I think even till more recently, you know, like Esther Perel or like Emily Nagoski, some of these bigger names have made this like more mainstream to discuss these topics. But I think that it's been pretty taboo for a long time. So I think spending time like in your journal with your friends, like again, there's a website called OMGYes that's all just like education about female anatomy and pleasure and like how to, it's like real people and then like science and medicine. And so there's just things you can do. And I think anything you care about, like your career, your outfits, your education, your animal, like everything that we love, we spend a lot of fucking time and energy doing. And I think this is something we all weirdly just expect to be awesome, but we don't think about the investment in making it awesome. It's just an interesting cultural phenomenon. Like alone people and couples will say like, why am I not having great sex? And it's like, would you like to do 4 things? And they're like, absolutely not. I would just like to have great sex.
Do you see people kind of not knowing what they want?
Mostly. And I say a lot, a nicer version of that. I don't love that
I
tone,
hate it.
by the way. I was like, I don't know who that was, but I say things more like, if you don't know, they really don't know, right? So if you're like, I don't like our sex, and they're like, okay, what should I do? And you're like, I don't know, just, I don't like it, right? It's like, this is kind of time to get even like the psychoeducation down of like where things are and what they're called for both partners. And also like sometimes little games, there's like dice or little card games you can play that are like, would you try this? Would you like this? Like, is this something you'd be into? There are apps where you can each check things that you'd like or don't like, and it only tells you if they match. Like, it's like things like this. We're getting creative with like getting people to figure this out. But I think if you don't know, your partner's really not going to know like what you're into. So it's worth it to spend some time on this. And I think it's interesting the other things we care about, our nutrition, our workouts, right? Like we'll just like research with this thing. We're kind of just like, we just expect it to be magical.
Do you think that our ability to kind of feel pleasure or, like do that exploring, do you think that's like is that affected by like our environment and the things that are happening in our lives? Like, how do we balance that?
I think 100% of people surveyed hate when I say you need to have date night. Like, they're just like, I don't want to schedule things. It's kind of the same energy. And I'm like, think of all the other things we schedule, like our trainer, like our, things for our horse, like things for our wardrobe, like things. So I think that, if your environment isn't like facilitating easy pleasure, like people are working too much, people are having menopause, people are having like health issues, right? I'm like, you got to get creative, you got to play games, you got to read books, you got to schedule things in, you got to consult with experts. Like, I truly believe all of this stuff is very treatable and very possibly able to get awesome, but you really do have to try, right? Like, it makes sense. Like, you have to lean into this stuff and be open and take suggestions and try things that are awkward and have conversations that make you like uncomfortable and cringy, and and then things do get better, right? So does that?
Yeah. No, that's great. So another question I have for both of you is, I've personally been in like conversations where it's groups of people and there's this emphasis on like orgasm and orgasm being like the goal, and like if you don't get to the orgasm and you didn't reach the goal, then like basically there's something wrong with you. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, for me, I mean, yeah, it's a nice goal, and it is something that I enjoy. But to me, if I just go for the orgasm, that's not satisfying for me. I need the foreplay. And that begins with the psychological mindset for me, because I know what I like. I know what I don't like. I've had a lot of trial and error if you haven't got that drift already. And so I know what I don't want. And I think that's the misconception, is that sometimes maybe we're so focused on the goal that we're not letting go so we can enjoy the exploration of the process, which I'm sure you encourage all the time.
That's often the assignment, I think, when people go to sex therapy is to practice not trying for orgasm and actually practicing trying for other goals like connection or just touching or being together. Maybe only one person gets pleasure one night and that's it, So like things can vary, I guess, and like what we would assign to overcorrect something that feels off. But generally speaking, I think that, of course, orgasms are awesome because it's chemicals. It's science that like lots of things happen to your body and your brain chemicals. So like, cool. That's like 100, but there's a million things under 100 that feel really good. And there's a million people in the world that have difficulty, especially when there's more pressure placed on that, on said orgasm. So I think that focusing on the connection and the intimacy and all the kinds of intimacy we can share and all the body parts and all the ways we can feel good, people then generally will get there, right? The goal will happen, but if you don't make that the goal, if the goal is to connect or if the goal is to touch or the goal is to have fun, I back that.
One of the things, just to add to that, because having my own voice was so hard for me. So the goal for me oftentimes was to advocate for what I liked and didn't like. And that sometimes didn't have to do with the actual sensation. It was just an acknowledgement that, wait, I don't like where that's going. And to actually speak up, because that was really hard for me to say, no, please don't do that.
Also people pleasing and orgasm stuff.
What's that? What's people pleasing?
That can be... those things are very comorbid where, if people are just trying to get someone to have an orgasm, they really aren't focused on their own pleasure or like really having a good time. They're just like trying to get someone to come, and they kind of lose a lot of the connection. I hear a lot of stories like that. So I almost like love when you're not going for that. I think a lot more beautiful, connected things can happen. And then weirdly, it usually happens because you're stoked like along the way. But yeah, sometimes when I assign people like a really helpful thing, like having alternating date nights where like one Friday is just your night and you get to have whatever kind of date night you want. And sometimes like the female partner stereotypically has lower libido, couples in their 20s maybe, and they'll be like, I just want to cuddle and watch Nancy Meyers movies and have chicken wings and not be pressured that we're going to have sex later the whole night. It's like, just like, they're like, oh God, when do I have to have the sex? When do I have to have the sex? When he has to come or it's going to be a bad date night. And then the next Friday could be his date night and it's like, sexy lingerie, like bunch of orgasms, like, right. But that's kind of what you're going into. So like, there's not this like pressure to not do that or not be present, or so I'm kind of like, maybe have orgasms sometimes and have orgasms not sometimes, and like see how that feels for everybody.
Are there sort of normal standards that you could kind of identify when it comes to like a healthy sex life or whatever? Like, is there a normality for you guys personally? Or because I've had it a lot of times where people will kind of say like, oh, do you think it's normal? Da, 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 da. Is there a normal? Like, is it normal to like only want to have sex once a week and someone else wants to have sex 5 times a day? Like, what is the normal?
No, I said no so fast because that's the most popular question I ever get. And it's 100 times a week. And I'm always like, no. What I say a lot in couples is like, your desire to have sex once a month and your partner's desire to have sex once a day, they're actually both totally equal, wants and needs. Like, I'm like, totally normal. So how, as a couple, do you figure that out? Like, do you do other stuff? Do you like do mutual masturbation? Do they like watch porn maybe? Like, you kind of figure these things out. So instead of like shaming or being like, oh my God, you're a sex addict, or like, oh my God, you have no desire, it's like, okay, let's just play with like what naturally you would guess is your rhythm and take the pressure off of you and see what unfolds. And I find that people then often meet much more in the middle.
I think you hit on something really important, the shaming piece with partners. And so something that, people would say, like you said, oh my gosh, you're such a sex freak. You want it every day, or you want it 3 times a week, and I'm working so much, there's no way. Well, you just shut down any opportunity of a future conversation with that partner. So how do you backtrack that, And that's where owning your part, saying, you know what, I really didn't mean to say what I said when I said you were a sex freak. I'm just trying to hold some space for your needs as well as mine. And so, like, trying to navigate that's when professional help usually comes into play. And maybe not Googling, the best way to have a barter or like a trade. Well, if I do this, then you'll do that. That usually takes the sensuality out of it, for me, at least.
And what's normal, like, for you? Some people like to masturbate daily. Some people masturbate quarterly. The same with partner sex. Like, it's like, what's your vibe? Like, what are you feeling like? And this will change with age, with life circumstance, with like who you're with, if you're alone. Like, this is a very evolving thing. That's why there's no right. I think if you feel like your needs are met and your partner's needs are met, like, that's the right rhythm. And it's so different. I've not ever met one person or one couple that has the exact same program. You know what I mean? Like,
what is the best way to approach a kind of awkward conversation about sex? Whether it's, someone who you've been with for a while, or whether it's someone who you're seeing in a casual way, or like, maybe a randomer, I don't know. Is there like a good way to have an awkward conversation?
Curiosity is, a curious vibe, not anything critical or shaming. Positive reinforcement's good in there also, but something just like, hey, what do you think about? Or like, hey, we've never talked about this. Like, would you be interested in, so like a very gentle, curious openness. I think when you say, like, we need to go to therapy, people panic. So, like, I think, like, save that after you've tried the first way. And my second piece on that is I call that, like, kitchen table talk. And I also think that it's often good talk to have when it's not dark out and when people haven't been drinking. Those are kind of my rules. That I think when it's dark out, people have often had a drink, or they're tired, or the day's wrapping up, and they're just not online for being open and being vulnerable. So I like when people are kind of having coffee or having a burrito, or just like, it's a very chill vibe. It's not already loaded or activated or intense. Definitely not when you're already fighting. Definitely not tied with other issues like chores plus our sex life sucks, right? Like, it's like, keep it positive, gentle, open, right? And just like really curious, like, hey, we've never like really discussed this. Like, what do you think about trying something different?
So that's where the elephant comes in handy. And you can say, hey, I just went to this talk, and you can show the flyer or say who was there. Say, I got this little elephant. Do you want to know what it was about? Again, open-ended question. You're not telling them, no, what was it about? Well, we talked about relationships, and they actually started talking about sex. And again, I guess the question is this like someone you're dating and haven't had sex with yet? Or is this, down the road that you want to revisit? Maybe like someone like me would end up in a relationship where I didn't talk about my needs. And then all of a sudden, like a year later, I'm like, yeah, I think I need to talk about what I want. So I'm not trying to keep those patterns going. But I think there's different ways depending on how you know the person. Mm-hmm.
How do you think our kind of life experiences and stories of origin affect our pleasure and sex life? Does our kind of erotic template, does that come from our experiences, or is that more a kind of like nature thing?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in on this one because I have, unfortunately, a lot of lived experience on putting myself in situations where I didn't have a lot of choice or agency, and I had a lot of sexual situations that I didn't want to have happen. And I'm not a victim, and I've worked through a lot of this, and I understand what those experiences then really, you go into the psychology of it, chemistry in my body made me either want or get really scared and really fearful. And so I really had to work through a lot of, again, finding my voice. But yeah, there was a lot of trauma in my, I'd say, 19 to 26, where I had to work through and overcome a lot of adversity in order to get to a very comfortable place where I am now.
Yeah. Can I just quickly ask, Natasha, how did you kind of start that? Obviously, you're, so experienced and have so much expertise. But if, you know, for someone in the audience who isn't an expert and like maybe doesn't necessarily, I don't know, maybe can't or is not ready to do like therapy, is that something that you can kind of start talking your way out of?
Talking your way out of what?
It's talking like an action, basically. It's being able to talk about the uncomfortable thing in action.
That's kind of what I really love about tonight. And thank you all for showing up and listening, even if you don't have a conversation that you want to take home and you want to put the elephant in your purse. You took the elephant with you and you showed up tonight. And I think just even this act of showing up for yourself, to put yourself in a room where we're talking about things that most people aren't going to have a conversation about, is really important. If I was in your shoes and I was 20, I'm going to be 50 this year, I was 22, 23, 24, and I ended up in a room like this, I would have been like, oh my fucking God, I am not going to talk about this stuff. But I kind of like listening to it. That would be the beginning. That's this opening of grace that hopefully you can take with you, even if you're really uncomfortable and like, I'm having a lot of anxiety right now, I want to smoke a cigarette. You know, we can take a smoke break, but there's just a lot of things that happen in your body, and you can help explain what that is. But yeah, sometimes starting therapy too soon when you're not ready is very unsafe. Especially because if you end up in the wrong hands. I mean, she's amazing, but not everybody's Adrienne. And you can end up in the wrong hands, and it actually can do more trauma really to you if you're starting to have conversations that you're not ready for and your therapist isn't skilled enough to handle. But yeah, I'd say the most important piece that when I was able to address my issues is that I had a safe girlfriend, someone a little bit more senior than me, who'd have a little more lived experience than me, and I trusted them. And she was about 15 years my senior, and she could see the trauma in me, and I couldn't see it. And she was like, she took my hand one day and she sat me down and she said, hey, are you okay? She actually caught me in a lucid daytime moment, no intoxication happening, and she said, are you okay? And it was just so tender and so surreal, and there's like that co-regulation that was happening in a sense where I knew how genuine and sincere she was, so it felt safe.
What role it would be sort of wrong of me not to ask this with my podcast, but what role does kind of physical or psychological pain play in relation to pleasure and sex and relationships?
That's a great question. I think so much it's in sexology school. I feel like there was about like a year of just kind of medical like pain or difficulty. So I wasn't aware until I studied it extensively, like how much this gets in the way of people's pleasure. I think pain is something like sex that people kind of shove down and don't talk about, or the shame, or they can't figure it out. So they disassociate, or right, like a lot of things we've discussed tonight. But I think that if you have an awesome partner or you're really comfortable with yourself, no matter what part of your body's hurting, or if you have a disability, or, you know, I have clients that have never had an orgasm and they don't know if they ever will, or maybe they were wounded in combat and they've never been with another person, or right. So there's always a workaround, according to me. There's always a way to feel sexual or sensual, or do other kinds of play or erotic like activity. You know, you can read smut and that can feel really good. You know, like you can, you know, there's people that have a job called a sexual surrogate that like work with sex therapists and do like actual sex acts with people, like in a really ethical way, rather than someone hiring an escort to work through things without anxiety, you know, with someone that cares and can show you what to do or how to. So I think if someone has pain, you know, in their pelvis or in their back, or, you know, that there's always like creative ways to get through anything. There's a lot of things you can do with sex and intimacy, like almost endless. So I think that pain is like acknowledging it's a thing, not having shame about it, having a cool partner, being cool with yourself to work around it, and then being creative. Yeah.
How do what do you think is the best way to deal with kind of going through or entering a stage where you kind of suddenly feel sexually apathetic, or like, you know, once you were super kind of passionate and sexual and engaged in that way, and you've kind of got to a point where you're not really finding your ground?
There's two kinds of desire, they say, the psychology says. And there's the desire, the natural kind you felt like when you look at someone and you're like, wow, like I want to be intimate like this. You know, what people say being horny, or people saying like wanting someone, longing, right? And then there's the kind that works if you start touching the parts, right? Like if you start foreplay, someone's like not really feeling it, but you start doing the things they like, and you will all of a sudden go, oh, this feels good. I remember I actually do want to do this. So then that can be a loner with a partner. So I always say don't get too obsessed if you're not having like kind of innate desire, and just like do the other one for a while. And it kind of, and the exception to that is if you have trauma and you have aversion, if someone's like bugging you to have sex and you don't feel like it and you're averse, like you're like hard no, don't force yourself to have sex and get in a disassociation. It's important. Differentiation.
I just want to double down on that. So one of the patterns I would find myself defaulting into is doing things because I'm a good girlfriend or I'm a good wife, and it'll get him off my back anyways. And he'll be quiet. And so the harm that happens there is that pattern of like sacrificing myself literally and physically in a way that I don't have to deal with it now. And so that was a really unhealthy pattern I got myself into for years. And I'm grateful that I have the agency to speak up now. But there are seasons, like after being a mom with 3 kids, like there's seasons where I don't know how many moms we have in here, but you're not going to want to have sex right after you have 3 little children running around and all those things. But I think that is quote unquote normal. And so not to judge yourself too harshly, but I think also the safety piece, and it's not just for people with like significant trauma, such as myself or yourself or what have you. I think for people who haven't maybe had what they call, significant trauma or what have you, sex is a really intimate, scary thing sometimes. And having clear communication, a daytime conversation, a walk in a park first can help just even give people and yourself time to say, I just had that conversation, right? So then if you do have an intimate act with them in the future, you have some agency about advocating for your needs.
When it comes to, so we've talked a little bit about desire differentials. What are the kind of different things that you see coming up quite a lot? Like, are there kinks that you see, and how does one kind of breach the subject of like, maybe I'm not into that, go away, or maybe actually I really am into that, and how do I go there?
I think kink is a whole other talk that we can have. It's a big talk. Another whole year, I think, of school was just that. I learned a lot. But something that's huge about sexual preferences, I say, like most things like aren't so pathological, and they're actually just someone's preference, even if it's not for you. So what I think is so important is like not judging or shaming if somebody likes something, not saying that's weird, that's gross, that's upsetting, but more being like, what part of that do you like? Like if it's something that seems violent to you, you're like, okay, I'm not going to go all the way to like full violent, but like you would like me to be more in control on date night. Like I can do that, right? So kind of investigating again, more curiosity with something. And just like not shaming people. If you can validate someone and say like, I got it, like for you and your brain and your life, you're into that. Like, I don't totally get it, but like you and you like it, got it, right? And then kind of go from there, and just like working with people. So if the desire differential is someone that wants to have sex twice a day and someone that wants to have sex once a month, try to not be like punishing or insecure or mean, and just say like, that's crazy, no one has sex that much, or like, that's unheard of, or you're a sex monster, or whatever. Kind of saying, like, wow, that's a big difference from like where I would be like, what are we going to do about that? And then allowing people to maybe just if you want to do like mutual masturbation, or allowing them to have their special porn time, or allowing them to like get that need met in a way that like still works for you, without compromising like what you want.
I always like, whether it's about sex or kink or whatever, I really like asking the person, if you're in a relationship, well, here's where my needs are. Thank you for sharing with me your needs. I see we have some distance. What kind of compromises are you willing to make? But not in a punitive way. Like you're saying, no shaming, no, oh, you're in trouble, or you can only do this, and not limiting yourself to, and they get to change their mind, I think. So I always like to give them space to say what their needs are, and then they get to change their mind just as much as I get to change my mind. I don't have to be locked into something I agreed to at month 9 or 9 years or what have you. And that having a non-judgmental, compassionate conversation.
Yeah. And you can change your mind. That's a big take home, is when you start being with someone and you're like, oh, this is so great that you initiate sex. I'm so bad at it. So we'll have sex every day because you're so good at it. And like 6 months in, you're like, oh my God, like I take it back. Like, you know? So I think that you're allowed to change your mind, and you're allowed to just kind of have like evolving, revolving conversations that like shift within a lifetime. Again, like, I can't tell you how much people change, you know, with themselves and with others. So
one of the things, I'll do a lot of talks and lectures at schools to teenage girls. And one of the things I'll say, just because you've maybe gone to third base with a boy, or you've gone all the way and you don't want to anymore, you did it just to make him like you, or because you thought he wanted to, you wanted to be cool, you get to change your mind. You get to take your power back or your agency back and say, I'm going to pause. I really like you. I don't want to stop dating, but I'm not comfortable having sex with you anymore. I'm too young, or I'm not ready, or it doesn't land well for me at night, or whatever the situation may be. And this goes for women in their 30s and 40s. There's no difference, you know. It doesn't mean just because they want to go X, Y, and Z and you did that, that you have to do it all the time. And I think that was a power moment for me when it's like, but I already told him I would do this and I've been doing it. What do you mean I get to change my mind?
huge. Yeah.
I could talk to you two for a very, very long time, but I'm conscious of the time right now. So I'd love to ask both of you, what is your kind of greatest lesson that you've learned about sex and love? And I guess in tandem with that, what's your best bit of advice that you could give to anyone?
All right. Well, I think you've heard a lot of my life lessons already. So maybe I'll talk about where I'm at right now, is to really the power of the pause. You guys have probably heard this a lot in other types of work. And before you react, you choose to respond. And I think that there's a lot of mindfulness for creating time and space with myself, not in an isolation way, but really in a way where I'm really pausing. Maybe I spend an afternoon, or maybe I spend a weekend with myself, and I'm just doing all the things that I want to do so that I can really find some peace and solace in what do I want. Again, those are my issues, right? I still have that kind of lingering drag of like, I have a choice, I have agency. So for me, it's really owning that I have value and worth, but not in a way where I want to get something from someone else. And I think that's the motivator, the driver of why do I like pretty things? Why do I want to have a nice house? Or why do I take care of myself or buy nice clothes? It really makes me feel good about myself. And if I don't have it, that's okay too, but I have a choice now, and to really honor that piece in me is kind of the season that I'm in right now.
I love that. I think that if I put all of that together, I always want to say, you know, I truly believe almost everything is treatable. Like whatever you're going through, if you aren't feeling great or suffering or feel like you're the only one that has this problem, or like it feels impossible, like just know like there's probably a way through. So I like to kind of empower people that if you really, again, want to make this a priority, or your love life, your sex life, your pleasure with yourself, your pleasure with others, like very possible. So stay open, stay creative, communicate as much as you can with people in your life. If it's friend, mentor, cool therapist, going to, sometimes there's like educational nights at like the high-end sex stores or something where it's like not too intense, but like something like this where there's just dialogue about stuff that we're not usually talking about. And, you know, just listening to yourself and like not comparing yourself to cultural norms of the one, or like, you know, hot, sexy marriages that last forever, or like things that you think are supposed to be normal or real. Just check in and be like, do I like this? Do I want this? Am I happy? What do I want? And that is a lifetime job.
The last piece I do want to share, this is just, you've probably heard this, but it was so simple, and sometimes the best sayings is that when I say no to someone else, I'm saying yes to myself. And that was something that took me some real time to actually digest. And I couldn't even get the words out, just no thank you, or I'm not ready for that, or maybe next time, is actually a validation in honoring myself, because if I don't, no one else is going to.
Thank you so much. You guys are so inspiring, and it's been a complete privilege to have the opportunity to get to do this with you. Thank you
for
so
being
much.
brave,
Thank
too.
you, Jean, and thank you, everybody.